Now, we all know that Apple can create popular products. I mean, they're behind some of the fastest selling consumer products ever. But in 2012, they released a product, a service that probably took a wrong turn with the launch of Apple Maps. Do you remember this in 2012 when Apple, with much fanfare, said, hey, we're ditching Google on our phones and we're going to release our own map service? The product was so bad, Apple Maps was so terrible that CEO Tim Cook was forced to offer a rare apology and tell people, hey, here are links to all of our competitors that are way better. Fast forward a decade, and opinions are starting to change about Apple's most hated product. With more on this, let's go to Carmi Levy, CTV's tech analyst. Carmi, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back, Elias. Thanks for having me.
Simple question. It is July 21st, 2023. Does Apple Maps still suck?
No, it doesn't. It's way better than it was way back when. Excuse me. I use it in my car. I've got CarPlay on my car. I use an iPhone. And of course, years ago when I first moved to the iPhone, the first thing I did was I downloaded all the Google apps, including Google Maps. And I have been using Google Maps kind of as a default, but I've sort of had Apple Maps kind of in the background, sort of been watching as Apple has been quietly making changes to it. And over time, it's gotten to the point where it's good enough. And we're almost at the point now where it's so good that a lot of people can just say, you know what, I can leave Google Maps behind, because there are a lot of areas where Apple is just better than Google Maps. For example, just the overall user interface. It's a lot easier to use in the car. They got these really big buttons that are a lot easier to find, far fewer presses to get what I need and get on my way. Whereas with Google Maps, I kind of have to fiddle around with it. Its accuracy, the maps are, in some cases, the guidance is far better than anything I get from Google. And, trying to get around Montreal, if you want to use public transit, Apple is actually better when it comes to public transit than Google. It tells you where you go, tells you how much it'll cost, has schedule information, real-time schedule information in some cases, that is leaps and bounds better than Google. So what started off as an absolute unmitigated disaster, easily one of the most embarrassing software releases in Apple history. I'll give Apple credit. They've doggedly kept at it for over a decade. And it's finally at the point now where a lot of people are going, you know what? Mm-hmm. I think I can forget that debacle. Now I'm just going to use it as my default because I don't really need anything else.
So for me, I went to Europe in June, Carmi, and it was using public transit in London and then in Athens, where I got frustrated with Google Maps. And I saw commentary online to say, hey, you know what? Try Apple Maps. Trust me. If you haven't used it in years, just try it. And when I did, I was like, oh, geez, the biggest thing is it seemed more beautiful but usable beautiful. Too often in the past, Apple was like, hey, this is beautiful, but it's useless. And now they've sort of turned the page where they've gotten the sort of connection between, okay, it's got to be both beautiful and usable. Let me ask you this. It's 2012 or 2023. It's 11 years. So they've made it better, but does Apple still move far too slow on making their services better?
To a certain degree, they do. I mean, it shouldn't take 11 years for the world's largest tech company to figure it out and deploy a map app that people like to use. Considering the resources that Apple has available to it, the company is worth $3 trillion. Let that sink in for a second. Trillion with a T. And so they could, if they wanted to, probably devote all of their engineering resources to it. They could have figured this out in 6 months. So that it took a decade, I'm thinking Tim Cook needs to learn how to move a little more quickly. But, Apple, of course, also has a lot of other priorities. Apple Maps is but one small piece of a very large empire. And they probably figured it didn't need to be, a world beater. In other words, Google doesn't sell as many phones as Apple. Google doesn't have, the kind of revenues that Apple does. Certainly not from hardware sales. And so Google put a lot more importance on Google Maps than Apple ever did on Apple Maps. And so I'm okay with that. And that's a decision that Apple made. And the truth of the matter is, if you're an Apple user, an iPhone user, you had choice. So, none of us was really losing sleep over it. It was kind of like a punchline. Go online, look at the gallery, see how lousy Apple Maps was at the beginning, have a good laugh, and then get back to using Google Maps to get where you need to go. But I think as Apple becomes more of a services company, they'll sell us fitness subscriptions, they'll sell us music subscriptions, TV subscriptions. Apps like Apple Maps are becoming more important. They're generating more revenue from them. So I think we are going to see Apple move faster in future, and I think that'll be good for you and me because as Apple is introducing new features, that pushes Google to improve its
competition,
service, which, Google Maps isn't perfect either. So competition is good for all of us. It means we get better apps sooner and faster, and it's less likely that they're going to direct us into the lake like some of them have in the past.
Now, having said all that, and you mentioned competition is very good. I'm still opening up Google Maps far more. Can we just talk about Google still has plenty of advantages. Where do you think Google still has the edge?
It all comes down to data. And so even, I've never seen an Apple car driving through my neighborhood, but I've seen Google go through my neighborhood countless times in recent years. And if you look at Google Maps and Google Street View history, it is updated far more frequently. The base data is far better for Google than it is for Apple. When a new neighborhood gets built not far from me, it'll be available on Google far sooner than it will be on Apple. And that's a really big deal if you're in an area that has lots of construction. Google's traffic data is still far more adaptive than Apple's is. So I know in real time what's going on. When there's a police interaction 8 blocks from my house, it shows up on Google Maps, whereas Apple is completely oblivious. And so, not that I live in a high crime area, but, Google is still a little bit better when it comes to real world. But at the same time, sometimes when I look at a Google map, it's like, it's harder for me to find what I need when all I want to do is get where I want to go. There's far too much detail on it. And I think Apple has done a really good job taking what was admittedly a prettier interface. The graphic imagery in Apple is beautiful, but it's made it adapts as we go along. So it only gives me the details that I need, not the stuff that I don't, which when I'm driving a car at 60 kilometers an hour through town is a much safer way to be. I fiddle less with Apple. I arguably believe it's a safer option for most people simply because it's easier to navigate all the features that are available to you.
One thing I just like to see, one of the major reasons I keep going back to Google is the information provided on my destinations. And I have a text message from a listener. I like Google because you get the restaurant ratings. and I was like, yep, I compare the Apple ratings that you get from third-party providers or the thumbs up that they're now providing, and it doesn't compare to the Google reviews. And I still think that info is a major advantage for Google.
Oh, I agree. Google's universe, in terms of sort of the amount of stuff they stuff in there, is still far wider than Apple's is. But, also, Apple is the most popular smartphone in North America. So over time, that will change as Apple figures out how to mine its users, mine its devices for more of this information and incentivize them to share their reviews as well within the Apple universe. So it is, the gap is getting narrower, but Google is still ahead in that regard. And if you value that kind of thing, and I know a lot of us do, I do as well, that's a big reason why you would use Google. Downloadable maps, another reason why I would use Google Maps in many situations, simply because if I'm driving on the highway and I don't have cell service, my maps stop working. So Apple's going to rectify that this year, but again, years after Google figured that out for itself.
That's it. They move too slow, and often you have to wait until the next operating system comes out in a year before they'll make those advancements, where it seems like Google, it's like every week, we found an improvement, let's add it in, right? And that's another thing, speed of these improvements.
You don't have to wait for that annual upgrade cycle, and that's a huge source of frustration. I really wanted to use Apple Maps when I was out in the middle of nowhere on the Trans-Canada a couple of months ago, and I couldn't because I had to wait until September when that thing went live.
It's
2023. We shouldn't have to operate that way.
Absolutely. Hey, Carmi, great discussion. Thanks so much.